Good morning. Corbin and myself are going to discuss the Gunnison Basin stream ecology in the face of climate change today. So, an overview of the presentation first. I'm going to do a brief introduction. Then we're going to jump right into the current status of flow regimes with the existing data for the Gunnison Valley. Next, we're going to look at an in-depth overview of prior local efforts within the Gunnison Valley. Then an assessment of the current data gaps of restoration efforts will be addressed. After that, we're going to look at examples of prior efforts from different regions around the country. These regions have similar landscape dimensions such as elevation, temperature, and geology. And finally, we're going to address the previous gaps of local efforts through giving suggestions of what should be conducted to address this issue. So a brief introduction. So climate change will have an effect on cold water fisheries as predicted by many different models. For the southwest United States, temperatures are predicted to increase to 5.5 degrees Celsius. These increased temperatures will greatly alter flow regimes of rivers within the basin due to decrease in snowpack. Precip is going to be the change of that is going to be pretty uncertain with a range of -5 to +5% by 2050. The taxa that we're going to be looking at are chard and smoliid. Chard is a trout species and smoliid is a salmon. They're both cold water species. So to date, broad studies of climate change and the effects of freshwater species have been largely focused on temperature. In this presentation, we're going to address other drivers that are crucial in understanding the systems such as flow regime and also biological interactions. A predicted percentage of habitat for these species shows that only 47% will be gone by 2080, so this is an issue that must be addressed now.
This table does a good job at summarizing the vulnerability of different aquatic habitats in the Gunnison Basin. As you can see, the groundwater dependent wetlands are the most vulnerable according to Gunnison Basin Climate Change Vulnerability Assessment. This is another good table that breaks down the exact or the things that are giving these areas the particular vulnerability assessment. For instance, as you can see, the groundwater dependent wetlands are being most impacted or most vulnerable because they are restricted to specific hydrogeomorphic setting. To get a better sense of the local status, I got some data from USGS for both Gunnison River and Ohio Creek. I felt like this characterized the valley pretty well because Ohio Creek is a small, higher elevation stream in the basin, while Gunnison River is a larger down in the valley river. I looked at the annual mean daily flow and found out on which day was that mean daily flow the highest across several years, and the R squared values for both Ohio Creek and Gunnison River were very low, which indicates that there was a lack of pattern and very weak correlation. I also looked at the timing of peak annual runoff in Gunnison River and Ohio Creek, and a similar story is told. The R squared values are very low, indicating indicating no trend and a lack of correlation. So based on this limited historic data, a trend was not apparent. However, some more advanced models with more massive data sets or can show some future projections. In these projections, they have found no significant stream flow trends. However, they have predicted that the timing of runoff will occur earlier, and in fact already has runoff already has begun 1 to 4 weeks earlier. Um,
So addressing prior local efforts, we looked at 3 different organizations: Trouts Unlimited, Parks, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and the Southwestern Climate Change Initiative workshops. So I'll first start off with Trouts Unlimited involvement. So their mission statement is to conserve, protect, and restore North America's cold water fishery watersheds. For the Gunnison Basin, they produced an extensive report for anglers of certain regulations and restrictions within the basin on given reaches, which is critical for conservation of all species. They're most concerned with the native cutthroat trout, which their species richness is extremely low due to warmer temperatures, lower flow regimes, and also competition from other species. Trouts Unlimited efforts is a great example of public engagement for anglers in the valley. Next, Colorado Parks and Wildlife has conducted a few restoration projects within the valley recently. The Gunnison River project was started in 2015 and is going to continue this summer. The project is looking at to improve divergent structures, increase trout habitat, and also have more connectivity between floodplains. Next, they have done a restoration project on Tamichi Creek, which entails stabilizing eroding banks, reducing channel width, excavating pools, and also enhancing trout habitat. Both these projects have the main mission of decreasing water temperature and increasing flow regimes, which is critical for trout habitat and also salmon habitat. Finally, the Southwestern Climate Change Initiative workshops has involved citizens and also environmental managers in this issue, and it will likely occur due to its funding. Assessment of current gaps. There's a limited amount of preliminary research conducted, such as interspecies interaction genetics and documented species ecosystem responses to climate change. Data gaps also include indirect effects of climate change, such as cascading trophic effect concept. So, in this situation, there has not been a great assessment on benthic organisms on fisheries, which is their main food in face of climate change. Also, there's been limited work done on the species reaction to climate change, such as migration patterns and when they're gonna lay eggs and such and reproduce. Also, there's been limited research on habitat alterations, where the habitat is going to move to, and also there needs to be an increased resolution of projected climate change within the Southwest.
the way we've addressed efforts for the issue has been pretty diverse because the impacts of climate change are diverse. But there's been a traditional 4-step approach where habit you start out with a habitat assessment in order to drive the project design. Step 2 is to focus on resilience in the specific area. Step 3 is to use smaller projects together in order to have a watershed scale impact. And step 4, to continue to monitor and analyze the effectiveness of your adaptation strategy. Southwest Climate Change Initiative also has a 3-step process where they start with a local vulnerability assessment and local education. Then they follow that up with science-based adaptation efforts. And then they also document their methods and their gain knowledge in order to improve other adaptation efforts. Trout Unlimited uses a three-step process as well, where they start out with protecting critical habitat that is in good shape. Step 2 is to reconnect tributaries to main streams to decrease fragmented habitat. And their step 3 is to restore the degraded wetlands and streams. Prior efforts have been very dependent on the ecosystem they're in, as well as what climate change impact is affecting the area the most. Organizations such as Southwest Climate Change Initiative has put out guides to help people direct their adaptation efforts, which includes everything from riparian and stream cover restoration, stream habitat restoration, stream channel reconstruction, reconnecting habitats, water allocation work, eliminating invasive species, and rehabilitating wetlands. There's a call to focus on high priority areas and areas that are most vulnerable due to limited funding. When addressing these gaps in previous local efforts, there's a call for increased collaboration. This could be done through workshops and also an effort to work across agencies, sectors, and scales in order to learn from previous efforts and to increase efficiency and productivity of adaptation efforts. There also needs to be more data, but until we get more data, we need to learn how to use these large global scale data sets and apply them to small scale problems and local efforts. Until we can do that, or while we're doing that, we may need to find more funding and more manpower for research at local levels. Key leaders that we look to address these issues are governors and policymakers, Department of Natural Resources, Colorado Water Conservation Board, the statewide Water Supply Initiative, as well as local working groups such as the Gunnison Climate Working Group.
So in conclusion, climate change is a realistic issue for cold water species in the Gunnison Basin. Rising temperatures will alter habitat due to warmer waters. These warmer temperatures will decrease snowpack, which will greatly affect flow regimes for our local rivers and streams, which will alter habitat as well. This is something we know, so this is something we should act on now before our fisheries are depleted so much that we can't recover them. This is also an economic issue. We depend on anglers for our local economies, so this is not just an ecological issue, it's for our local economies, so we definitely need to address this issue sooner than later. For questions, after reviewing this PowerPoint, please contact Corbin or myself for any questions, and thanks for your time. And here's our bibliography as well.